Amara Adelik wasn't just living the Lagos dream. She was the Lagos dream, packaged and presented daily to her 2.8 million Instagram followers. As the daughter of Chief Adekunle Adelik, a real estate mogul and political heavyweight whose name commanded access faster than any biometric scanner, Amara's existence played out like a highlight reel of unattainable luxury. Her world was a penthouse apartment in Ikoyi overlooking the lagoon, sun-drenched weekends in Dubai, coveted front-row seats at Lagos Fashion Week, and an endless stream of brunches at exclusive spots like Nok by Alara. Her feed, under the handle at Sunshine Amara, projected a carefully constructed image of effortless chic, aspirational living, and flawlessly filtered smiles, punctuated by hashtags like #LagosLiving, #Blessed, and #LuxuryLifestyle. But Lagos, as anyone who truly knows it understands, is a city of stark contrasts and hidden depths. Beneath the shimmering veneer of Victoria Island and Lekki Phase 1 lies the raw, relentless energy of the mainland, the shadowed, complex waterways of Makoko, and the ceaseless hustle that powers the city's undeniable heartbeat. Occasionally, these disparate layers don't just coexist, they collide with violent force. The collision occurred on a Tuesday night, specifically the Tuesday following the high-profile launch of her fiancé, David Okonkwo's new fintech app. The event itself had been a major social affair, documented extensively across platforms like Beleneja and Pulse NG. David, hailing from established wealth himself, represented the ideal match for Amara, both in societal standing and Instagrammable perfection. Their engagement photos, staged on a luxury yacht with the iconic Lekki Ikoyi link bridge framing the background, had shattered her previous like records, celebrated under #AdaDavid2024 and #PowerCouple. Amara had slipped away from the celebratory dinner early, citing a headache as her excuse. The unspoken truth was a growing sense of suffocation beneath the weight of relentless perfection. David, already immersed in calls from potential investors eager to capitalize on the app's buzz, barely registered her departure. Downstairs, her longtime driver Musa, a stoic man from the north who had served the family for years, waited patiently beside the gleaming black G-Wagon. The journey back to her Ikoyi sanctuary should have been a brief 20-minute affair, even factoring in Lagos's typically moderate evening traffic. They were smoothly navigating Osborne Road, the streetlights casting elongated streaks on the rain-slicked tarmac. Amara was absently scrolling through the comments on her latest Instagram post, a deluge of fire emojis and envious God when declarations, when her meticulously ordered world abruptly tilted on its axis. Out of the urban tapestry, a battered Danfo bus materialized, swerving with aggressive intent directly into their path. Musa was forced to slam on the brakes, the protest of tires tearing through the night air. Before the sound could fully dissipate, two figures emerged from the shadows. Clad in black hoodies and concealing face masks, they moved with brutal efficiency. One wrenched open the rear door, seizing Amara with an iron grip, the cold, unmistakable pressure of a gun barrel pressed against her temple. The other dealt swiftly and silently with Musa. A sickening thud echoed briefly, followed by an unnerving silence from the front seat. Amara remained frozen, shock stealing the scream from her throat. Her senses registered a disorienting jumble. The acrid smell of cheap disinfectant mingling with stale sweat, the rough, abrasive texture of a sack being pulled forcefully over her head, plunging her into darkness. Then came the jarring motion as she was bundled unceremoniously into another vehicle, something smaller, older, its interior permeated by the faint but distinct odors of fish and gasoline. The roar of an engine grew, then faded into the vast, indifferent soundscape of the Lagos night, leaving behind only darkness and rising panic. Within an hour, the #FindAmara began its viral ascent, trending globally. Chief Adelik, his face a mask of grim determination, appeared on Channels TV, his voice strained as he announced a staggering 100 million naira reward for her safe return, promising no questions would be asked. David, projecting an image of utter devastation, posted tearful appeals on his Instagram stories, pleading for any information. Online speculation ran rampant, exploding across social media platforms. Theories range from political rivals targeting the chief, to a business deal gone sour, to a random act of kidnapping by emboldened area boys exploiting the nation's pervasive insecurity. Some whispered of darker, more personal motives. Comment sections transformed into virtual battlegrounds, filled with armchair detectives dissecting Amara's recent posts, searching for hidden clues or coded messages within her curated online life. Amara drifted back to consciousness slowly, her head throbbing with a dull, persistent ache. The suffocating sack was gone. She found herself lying on a thin, lumpy mattress within a small, dimly lit room. The walls were bare, rough concrete, sweating faintly in the humid air. A single narrow window, fortified with iron bars, offered a stark view of dark, swirling water, unmistakably the lagoon, its presence announced by the pervasive smell of salt, decay, and that uniquely Lagosian blend of life and pollution. A solitary bare bulb hung precariously from the ceiling, casting long, unsteady shadows that danced with the room's minimal contents. The air was thick, heavy, carrying the distant, rhythmic thrum of generators and the intermittent sputtering of boat engines traversing the nearby waterways. Fear, no longer buffered by shock, finally pierced through, cold and sharp. This wasn't a coy. This wasn't an elaborate, twisted prank. This was terrifyingly real. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs like a frantic, talking drum. Drawing her knees tightly to her chest, she sat up, pressing herself against the cool, damp wall, consciously trying to regulate her ragged breathing. Her expensive silk blouse was torn at the shoulder, her designer jeans smudged with grime. Her phone, her constant companion and lifeline to the world she knew, was conspicuously absent. The heavy wooden door creaked open, making Amara flinch violently. A figure stood silhouetted against the slightly brighter light from outside. Tall and lean, dressed simply in faded jeans and a plain black t-shirt, he radiated a quiet confidence, an unnerving stillness that set him apart from the men who had abducted her. He moved deliberately, without overt menace, yet commanded the space. Stepping further into the weak light, his features became clearer. He appeared young, likely in his late 20s, with intelligent, observant eyes that seemed to miss nothing. His face was defined by high cheekbones and a strong jawline, his short, neat dreadlocks tied back from his forehead. An intensity emanated from him, more unsettling than outright aggression. He carried no visible weapon. Amara felt the desperate questions rise in her throat. Who was he? What did they want? But the words caught, choked by fear. She managed only a shaky, whispered query about his identity and their intentions. He regarded her for a long moment, his expression carefully neutral, unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, low-pitched, carrying a Lagos accent that hinted at education overlaid with the unmistakable cadence of the street. He introduced himself simply as Kazim. With a vague gesture encompassing the Stark room, he informed her that this would be her accommodation for the foreseeable future. Amara immediately invoked her father's name, her voice trembling but insistent, promising vast sums of money, anything they desired, if they would just let her go. The words felt rehearsed, borrowed from countless Nollywood thrillers. A fleeting, humorless quirk touched Kazim's lips, not quite a smile. He acknowledged her identity, even using her Instagram handle, Sunshine Amara, not with mockery, but as a statement of fact. He confirmed they were fully aware of her father's status. Then, chillingly, he stated that their objective wasn't solely about money. Pressed further about their motives, Kazim deflected. For the present, he stated, his only requirement was that she eat. He placed a plastic plate containing jollof rice and fried plantain on a small wooden stool near the mattress. He issued a calm but firm warning against any escape attempts, pointing out the locked door, the window leading directly into the treacherous lagoon waters, emphasizing that the only way out was through him. Without another word, he turned and departed, the heavy door clicking shut behind him. The sound of a bolt sliding firmly into place echoed ominously in the confined space. Amara stared at the plate of food, her stomach churning with a mixture of hunger and defiance. She resolved not to touch it, not to grant them even that small measure of compliance. Yet the familiar, comforting aroma of the jollof rice, a staple of her former life now presented in this grim context, began to wage its own subtle war against her resolve. Days blurred into an indistinguishable passage of time, marked only by the changing light outside the barred window and Kazim's brief appearances. He became her sole point of human contact. Twice daily he delivered food, simple, local dishes like beans and dodo, Ava Goin, or occasionally, suyaskewars wrapped in newspaper. He never lingered, never ate with her, simply leaving the plate and returning later to collect the empty one. His responses to her persistent questions remained selective, often vague and frustratingly oblique. When Amara, her voice raw with desperation, demanded to know why she had been chosen, Kazim had looked out at the swirling water, cryptically replying that she represented something. Pressed to elaborate, he merely stated excess. Disconnect. His words hung in the humid air, offering no comfort, only more questions. While Kazim exhibited no physical cruelty, the oppressive confinement, the gnawing uncertainty, and the complete, disorienting loss of control constituted their own form of psychological torture. Stripped of her phone, her social connections, her entire identity, Amara felt adrift. Yet, Kazim occasionally offered small, unexpected gestures. He began bringing her books, surprisingly recent novels by acclaimed Nigerian authors like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie and Oyinkan Braithwaite. Once, he even provided a small, portable radio. Tuning into stations like Wazobia FM, Amara listened with surreal detachment to news reports detailing her own disappearance, the frantic ongoing search, and the wild, often inaccurate, speculation proliferating online. It felt like observing commentary on a stranger's tragedy. She gleaned that Kazim was not operating alone, though she never laid eyes on any Confederates. Muffled voices, sometimes carried from outside, along with the distinct sounds of boat engines arriving and departing at irregular, often nocturnal, hours. Kazim seemed to hold a position of authority, or at least, he was the one designated to manage her directly. Slowly, painstakingly, Amara began to shift from passive victim to active observer. She started noticing Kazim's routines, the way he always double-checked the door lock, the subtle limp that occasionally surfaced when he believed she wasn't looking, the callous texture of his hands, hinting at a life far removed from a Koi's manicured lawns. She detected fleeting moments when his carefully maintained guard seemed to slip, revealing glimpses of weariness, frustration, or perhaps even regret. One evening, the Lagos sky unleashed its fury. A fierce electrical storm raged, rain lashing against the window panes, thunder vibrating through the flimsy structure of the shack. Predictably, the power grid failed, plunging the small room into absolute, disorienting darkness. Amara gasped involuntarily, a fresh wave of fear spiking through her. Almost immediately, the door opened. Kazim stood framed in the doorway, holding aloft a rechargeable lamp. Its steady glow illuminated his face, softening his usually intense features. He quietly remarked that the backup generator would soon kick in, placing the lamp on the stool near her mattress. But this time, he didn't leave right away. He lingered by the door, his gaze fixed on the dramatic spectacle outside, watching lightning flashes momentarily illuminate the violently choppy surface of the lagoon. In a low voice, barely audible above the storm's roar, he inquired if she was scared. Amara hesitated. Honesty felt like a vulnerability she couldn't afford, yet lying seemed utterly pointless in their shared predicament. She admitted her fear, her voice small. Then, finding a sliver of courage, she turned the question back on him. He turned from the window, his eyes meeting hers in the dim, flickering lamplight. He confessed to occasional fear, but clarified it wasn't the storm that unsettled him. It was the first significant crack in his detached, controlled facade. A shared moment of vulnerability, however brief, had been unexpectedly forged by the external chaos of the storm. He left shortly thereafter, but the atmosphere within the small room had subtly, irrevocably shifted. Weeks stretched into a month. The initial frenzy surrounding the #FindAmara hashtag began to subside online, gradually overshadowed by newer scandals, emerging trends, and the relentless pace of the digital news cycle. Chief Adelik, his public appearances increasingly strained, doubled the reward money, his desperation palpable. David continued to post tributes, but less frequently now, his feed slowly reverting to focus on his business ventures, albeit always with a poignant mention of his missing queen. Inside the waterside shack, a strange and complex dynamic was unfolding. Amara, starved for human interaction beyond her captor, found herself initiating conversations with Kazim. Her tone shifted from pleading and demanding to questioning and probing. She asked about the books he brought, about his perspective on Lagos, about the lagoon itself, its mysteries, and its role in the city's underbelly. To her surprise, Kazim began to respond more openly. He spoke of his upbringing in the densely populated, often marginalized neighborhood of Ajigunal. He described the relentless daily hustle for survival, the systemic barriers and inequalities that trapped generations in cycles of poverty. He never explicitly justified his actions in kidnapping her, but he painted a vivid, stark picture of a Lagos utterly removed from Amara's privileged Okoye bubble. He possessed a sharp intellect, a cynical wit honed by experience, and a deep-seated resentment directed towards the city's ruling elite. During one exchange, sparked by Amara mentioning a lavish charity gala her family had hosted, Kazim scoffed dismissively. He questioned the source of her father's wealth, suggesting that every gleaming skyscraper erected in developments like Eco-Atlantic cast long, dark shadows that engulfed the communities where people like him grew up, often displaced or ignored by progress. Amara found herself instinctively defending her father, her family, the life she had known. Yet unsettlingly, Kazim's words sometimes struck a resonant chord. She recalled instances of casual corruption she'd witnessed, the subtly dismissive manner her father often employed with his staff, the vast, seemingly unbridgeable chasm separating her world from the one Kazim inhabited and described. She also started to notice a change in the way Kazim observed her. It was no longer just the watchful gaze of a captor monitoring a prisoner. There were fleeting moments, his eyes lingering a fraction of a second too long when their gazes met, the way he would quickly avert his stare. Amara felt a confusing, unsettling turmoil of emotions. Fear remained a constant, yet it mingled with something else, a strange flicker of connection, a morbid fascination. The situation felt dangerous, terrifying, and utterly bewildering. She wondered if this was the Stockholm Syndrome she had vaguely read about in psychology articles, a captive bonding with her captor. Or could it be something more genuine, an unexpected affinity born from shared confinement, forced proximity, and brutally stripped-down honesty? One afternoon, Kazim's usual composure seemed fractured. He paced the limited confines of the room, his movements betraying a nervous energy that replaced his typical calm demeanor. Amara, feeling emboldened by their recent, more open conversations, cautiously asked what was wrong. He stopped pacing, running a hand distractedly over his dreadlocks. He spoke of complications, revealing that people, his associates, were growing impatient. They demanded results, and her father, while engaging in negotiations, wasn't complying as readily as they had anticipated. Chief Adelik, Kazim explained, was simultaneously leveraging his extensive connections, actively trying to locate them, applying pressure from multiple angles. Amara stated the obvious. Her father wanted her back, Kazim let out a short, harsh, bitter laugh. He countered that her father wanted his asset back, his investment, his carefully polished public image restored. The accusation stung Amara, partly because a small, treacherous voice deep within her wondered if there wasn't some uncomfortable truth to his words. The complication Kazim had alluded to materialized violently a few nights later. Amara was jolted from a restless sleep by the sounds of shouting just outside the shack, followed immediately by the unmistakable crackle of gunfire. This wasn't the distant, almost routine pop-pop of Lego street crime. This was close, heavy, automatic weapon fire, terrifyingly immediate. Her door burst inward. It wasn't Kazim. Two rough-looking men she didn't recognize stormed in, their faces grim, guns raised menacingly. Before Amara could fully process the intrusion, Kazim appeared behind them, moving with astonishing speed and lethal precision. What followed was a blur of violent motion, guttural shouts, and the sickening crack of bone impacting flesh. Within seconds, the two intruders were neutralized, lying incapacitated or worse on the rough floorboards. Kazim stood over them, breathing heavily, a pistol now held firmly in his hand, his eyes blazing with a dangerous light. He grabbed Amara's arm, his grip urgent. He told her they had to move immediately. Stumbling after him, still reeling from the sudden violence, Amara managed to ask what had happened, who those men were. Kazim explained tersely that his supposed associates had decided to unilaterally change the terms of their arrangement, attempting to seize her directly. He practically dragged her out of the compromised shack and onto a rickety wooden jetty where a small, unassuming speedboat bobbed in the dark, churning water. The air hung thick with the acrid smells of gunpowder and the recent rain. He pushed her forcefully into the boat, quickly started the engine, and gunned it, speeding away from the scene of the conflict, leaving the chaos and the bodies behind. They navigated the dark, complex, labyrinthine waterways of the lagoon, the distant lights of a Lego skyline providing an indifferent, glittering backdrop. Amara huddled low in the bottom of the speeding boat, shivering uncontrollably from a combination of cold, fear, and adrenaline. She understood Kazim hadn't rescued her out of altruism. He had acted to protect his leverage, his bargaining chip. Yet the undeniable fact remained. He had intervened, saving her from the other men. He transported her to a new hiding place, a large, half-completed building situated deep within an industrial area of Ikoridu, overlooking a murky, refuse-choked creek. This new location was larger than the waterside shack, but felt dustier, colder, more desolate. Once again, he secured her in a room, continued to bring her food, and maintained his vigilant watch. The dynamic between them shifted once more. The recent violence had shattered the fragile, tentative truce they had inadvertently established. Kazim became warier, visibly tenser, his silences now heavier, less communicative. Amara felt the invisible net tightening around them, sensing the situation spiraling rapidly out of control. Escape, which had always seemed improbable, now felt utterly impossible. Yet, paradoxically, the shared experience of danger, coupled with Kazim's decisive, protective actions, regardless of his underlying motives, had intensified her already deeply conflicted feelings. She observed the immense pressure he was clearly under, recognizing the danger he now faced not just from the authorities, but from his own erstwhile allies. A strange empathy began to bloom amidst the fear. She started consciously leaving portions of her food untouched, feigning a loss of appetite. When Kazim eventually inquired about her lack of eating, she merely shrugged noncommittally. One evening, noticing his limp seemed more pronounced than usual, she acted on impulse. Tearing a strip of fabric from the hem of her now ragged designer blouse, she quietly held it out to him. She suggested he use it to wrap his injured leg. Kazim stared first at the proffered strip of silk, then intently at her face. His expression remained unreadable, guarded. Slowly, hesitantly, he accepted the makeshift bandage, his fingers brushing against hers as he took it. A palpable jolt, like unexpected static electricity, passed between them in that brief contact. He offered no verbal thanks, but significantly, he didn't discard the piece of cloth. A few days later, Kazim entered her room, his face etched with a grim finality. He informed her that the time had come. An agreement had finally been reached. The terms were settled. The exchange, he stated, was scheduled for that very night. Amara's heart leaped, experiencing a confusing maelstrom of emotions. Profound relief at the prospect of freedom warring with an unnamed reluctance. A strange sense of loss. Was it regret? Or perhaps a nascent fear of returning to the gilded cage she hadn't fully recognized or resented until her captivity. She sought details. Where, how would the exchange take place? Kazim revealed the location. The third mainland bridge, notoriously one of Lagos's longest and busiest arteries. The time, midnight. Her father would be present with the ransom money. Kazim himself would bring her. He paused, his gaze searching her face as if seeking something unreadable. He declared that her ordeal was over. Midnight on the third mainland bridge presented an eerie, unnatural spectacle. The iconic structure, typically choked with relentless traffic day and night, stretched out deserted under the sodium lights, blocked off at both ends by unseen, powerful forces. Undoubtedly a demonstration of Chief Adelik's considerable influence. The air hung thick with tension, smelling faintly of exhaust fumes from the few idling vehicles present. Headlights sliced through the oppressive darkness, creating stark contrasts of light and shadow. Kazim led Amara out of his nondescript vehicle, maintaining a firm, controlling grip on her arm. He positioned her slightly ahead of him, a subtle but clear human shield. Across the empty expanse of asphalt, another vehicle waited. Her father's familiar black G-Wagon. Chief Adelik stood beside it, flanked by two imposing, suited security guards. David, her fiancé, was also present, looking pale, drawn, and visibly anxious under the harsh lights. Kazim's voice, tight with tension, cut through the silence, demanding the money. Chief Adelik responded with a gesture. One of his guards carried forward two heavy, locked briefcases, placing them deliberately on the ground midway between the two groups. The chief's voice, hard and commanding, insisted Amara be released first. Kazim countered, demanding visual confirmation of the money. A tense standoff ensued. Seconds stretched into an eternity, filled only by the ambient hum of the sleeping city carried on the night breeze and the distant, rhythmic lapping of the lagoon waters against the bridge pylons far below. Suddenly, David stepped forward impulsively, his voice cracking with emotion as he called out Amara's name, asking if she was all right, urging Kazim to just let her go and take the money. Kazim's head snapped instinctively towards David's outburst. In that fractional moment of distraction, Amara made her move. It wasn't a move towards her father, towards the presumed safety of the G-Wagon. With unexpected speed and force, she twisted sharply, driving her elbow hard into Kazim's ribs, precisely where she knew he was most vulnerable from the earlier fight. He gasped, his grip faltering from the sudden pain. Simultaneously, she brought her heel down hard onto his foot, further disrupting his balance. Before anyone, her shocked father, a stunned David, even Kazim himself, could fully react or comprehend what was happening, Amara deftly snatched the pistol Kazim had tucked securely into the back waistband of his jeans. She had observed him place it there earlier. She had been watching, waiting, calculating. She spun around, weapon now firmly in her grasp. But she didn't aim it at Kazim. Instead, she leveled the pistol with chilling steadiness directly at her own father, Chief Adekunle Adelik. A collective gasp seemed sucked from the air. Amara's voice, when it came, though unspoken in direct dialogue, carried a cold, clear, utterly transformed authority that commanded absolute stillness. Nobody move. Chief Adelik stared, utterly dumbfounded, his face a mask of disbelief and outrage. He demanded to know the meaning of this apparent madness. ordering her to put the weapon down. David, equally aghast, stammered disbelief, suggesting Kazim must have brainwashed her. Kazim, recovering his footing, looked at Amara not with anger, but with a dawning, horrified understanding rapidly replacing the shock in his eyes. A chilling laugh escaped Amara then, a sound devoid of humor that echoed unervingly across the deserted bridge. Brainwashed? The notion seemed to amuse her darkly. She addressed David's naivety, his tendency to think within conventional limits. Then her focus, sharp and accusatory, shifted to her father. Did he truly believe this was a simple ransom situation? Did he imagine Kazim and his associates were mere opportunistic kidnappers? Chief Adeli continued to sputter, calling it madness. But Amara countered coolly. The real madness, she conveyed through her cold fury and unwavering stance, was the suffocating control he had exerted over every aspect of her life. The madness was the endless performance of the perfect daughter, the perfect fiancée, smiling endlessly for cameras and social media while feeling hollowed out inside. The true madness, she implied, eyes flashing with condemnation, was watching him build his empire by destroying lives, ruthlessly stepping over people like Kazim's family through unethical land grabs and corrupt deals. She gestured towards Kazim, who remained utterly still, watching her intently. The bombshell dropped. Kazim hadn't truly kidnapped her. It was Amara herself who had initiated contact. She had found him, knowing his group was already investigating her father's questionable business practices. Specifically, the deals that had displaced Kazim's community years prior. She admitted to feeding them crucial inside information, actively helping them plan the staged abduction. David reeled, unable to process the revelation. Why? The question hung in the air. Amara's gaze, when it fell on David, was devoid of any previous warmth or affection. Her motive, she made clear, was escape. Escape from the predetermined life they had all mapped out for her. Escape from the hollow performance. And, she added, turning back to her father with icy pragmatism, it was also about securing her inheritance ahead of schedule. Those briefcases, full of cash? She considered them her severance package from the family business and the life she was rejecting. Kazim finally found his voice, though the narrator conveys his low, strained words. He questioned if she had set him up entirely, if the violent attack by his associates at the shack was part of her manipulation. Amara turned slightly toward him, a flicker of something complex and unreadable in her eyes. She conceded the attack was an unfortunate deviation, clarifying that those greedy associates weren't part of her original, simpler plan. Her scheme involved leveraging Kazim's legitimate grievance against her father to stage a kidnapping, secure the funds, and vanish. Kazim was meant to be her unwitting escape facilitator, not collateral damage. She acknowledged, with a hint of detached admiration, his impressive handling of the unexpected attack. Kazim stared at her, the sting of betrayal warring visibly with a dawning, almost sixth sense of respect for her sheer audacity and manipulative genius. He had been played masterfully. The deep conversations, the moments of shared vulnerability, the symbolic gesture with the strip of cloth for his wound. Had it all been calculated performance? Or had something genuine, however twisted, mingled with the cold manipulation? He couldn't decipher the truth in her inscrutable expression. Chief Adeli erupted, accusing her of ingratitude after everything he had provided. Amara retorted that what he had provided was merely a cage, albeit a beautiful, gilded one. Tonight, she declared her intention to fly free. Keeping the gun steady, she began backing away slowly towards the edge of the bridge railing. She warned them not to follow, stipulating the briefcases must remain. Her final gaze rested on Kazim. She acknowledged the truth in his earlier words about the city's shadows, suggesting it was perhaps time she explored them herself. Reaching the concrete barrier, she looked down briefly at the dark, swirling waters of the Lagos Lagoon far below. From the darkness on the far side of the bridge pylons, unseen until now, the low thrum of a powerful speedboat engine suddenly sputtered to life. Her real escape plan, waiting patiently. Her last conveyed message was a farewell to her father and a dismissive, almost cruel instruction for David to update his relationship status, labeling it complicated. Then, with a final enigmatic look directed solely at Kazim, a look that seemed to hold a universe of unspoken complexities, calculation, perhaps regret, maybe even a residual spark of the dangerous connection they had forged, Amara Adelik, the carefully crafted sunshine of a koi, vaulted decisively over the railing and plunged into the black water below. Chief Adelik's anguished cry of her name pierced the night. David stood frozen, paralyzed by shock and disbelief. Kazim simply watched the spot in the dark water where she had vanished. Had she jumped to her death, overwhelmed by her own plan? Or had she jumped towards a calculated, watery freedom? Seconds later, the waiting speedboat's engine roared to life, pulling away swiftly from the bridge pylons, its form quickly melting into the vast, impenetrable darkness of the lagoon. Back on the bridge, the fragile silence shattered as chaos erupted. The distant wail of sirens grew louder, finally approaching the scene. Amara Adelik was never officially seen again. The accepted narrative became one of a tragic kidnapping gone horribly wrong. The beautiful heiress tragically lost to the depths of the lagoon. The hashtag RIP Amara trended briefly before fading. In the aftermath, Chief Adelik's formidable empire began to crumble, weakened by a series of subsequent investigations sparked by anonymous, highly damaging leaks. These leaks contained incredibly specific, incriminating details about his most corrupt land deals, details only someone intimately close to him, someone with access to his private affairs, could possibly have known. David Okonkwo's fintech app eventually launched, but its success was forever tainted by the scandal, the shine irrevocably gone. And Kazim? He vanished as effectively as Amara had, dissolving back into the intricate, anonymous layers of Lagos. Rumors occasionally surface. Some whisper he now uses his skills and street intelligence differently, working discreetly to help marginalized communities fight against unfair displacement and predatory development. Others claim he spends long nights gazing out over the dark expanse of the lagoon, forever wondering about the young woman who had so expertly played the role of victim, mastermind, and perhaps, just perhaps, something more profound, all within the same complex, deceptive performance. Somewhere far from the relentless energy of Lagos, perhaps reclining on a sun lounger on a pristine beach where no one recognizes her face or knows her former name, maybe checking cryptocurrency prices on an untraceable burner phone, Amara Adelik is finally living a life completely unfiltered, entirely on her own terms. She successfully traded her gilded cage for the unpredictable shadows, outplaying everyone in her orbit, her powerful father, her trusting fiancé, her conflicted captor, her 2.8 million followers, and ultimately, perhaps even herself. She became the ultimate architect of her own narrative, disappearing into a story of her own making. Omo, did you see that coming? Lagos breeds survivors, but Amara, she didn't just survive, she rewrote the entire game. Forget ancient folk tales of cunning tortoises. The most intricate webs these days are woven on Instagram feeds, encrypted chats, and burner phones. What did you think? Was Amara a ruthless anti-hero or justified in her escape? Was Kazim purely a pawn, or did a real connection complicate the betrayal? Drop your theories and reactions in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Folktales Blockbuster, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next story.